Welcome to Everyday Economics, a weekly podcast about the economics in daily life. I'm your host, Pooja Mehra. Last week, I spoke with Lekha Chakrabarty about the interplay of gender and caste issues in economics, gender budgeting, and the statistical invisibility of the gig economy. This week, we're playing the concluding part of that conversation, in which Lekha talks about the challenges economists like her face in incorporating these issues into policy frameworks.
Of course, it's early days, and I think this is a long journey you're going to have to undertake. But what are the kind of challenges, that you're facing? I would imagine, especially in a country like India, we've already talked about the data challenges, but there would be the challenge of implementation capacity, which applies to everything that is done in the government sector. But also maybe cultural challenges, in making sure that people begin to think about these issues from the gender perspective.
Absolutely. The question you're asking is it's a young revolution, but how you're going to link your resources to the results. And this is a very important question. The moment we talk about gender budgeting, the criticism is that it is not outcome linked.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a question. And, in NIPFP, we realized that this macro policy framework, the outcome budgets, they have incorporated the gender budgeting, but this is a policy failure, not only of gender budgeting, but of any specific public financial tool. It's not outcome linked. It's not gender specific. And we try to solve this problem by taking one major the program or the scheme or something in our country, which was a flagship program at that time, which was the largest credit-linked poverty program in India. And we tried to, pin down from the financial allocations to the time in which it is getting actually translated into outcomes. So, but that kind of studies in the context of finance ministry, they won't be able to do. But the research institutes like NIBM, which is the RBI Research Institute, and NIPFP, we have collaborated to find out how to link the gender budgeting to the gender outcomes. So this experiment was floated for the 6 banking zones in the region that time, and it was on the financial empowerment. It's like a financial inclusion scheme. But that time, the inferences we got is it's not the cost of credit that matters for women. It's the access to credit that matters. Yeah, of course. Okay. It's the access that matters for women. Because only recently we have thought about the digital infrastructure and giving bank accounts for women. That time, they were playing with the high cost of credit with the indigenous money lenders. And the moment they take the money from the bank, how you repay? If you look at the repayment statistics, the women are not defaulters. But the moment you look into the source of repayment, they were doing Ponzi finance with the indigenous money lenders and they were paying back, but not by creating income. So these kind of issues, when we studied in detail that how it is related to outcome, but it's a complex procedure, the relationship of gender budgeting to outcome. So this was a massive, a huge study we have done at NIPFP, NIBM, the RBI Institute, and the Ministry of Rural Development. So such kind of studies, we need to do this research, collaboration. We need to do more to understand the linking of, gender budgeting to outcomes. Having said that, I also see that outcome, it's not just related to fiscal policy. For instance, if you have a policy in your country to reduce the maternal mortality, but maternal mortality, there's a famous literature that it's a 3 delay thing. One, the woman, she has to accept that she's not feeling well and she has to articulate it to her close relative. It takes time. Second, the close relative is taking a decision, but you don't have the proper infrastructure or proper roads in your village to take that lady to the healthcare center. So that is a delay number 2. And the delay number 3 is the way she's going to get the healthcare benefits or the healthcare attention in that primary health center the moment she reaches. So in this 3 delay scheme, the first one is not fiscal, but the second one related to the good roads, good physical infrastructure, that is quite fiscal. And the third one, providing good healthcare provisioning, that is fiscal. So the moment you ask me how you relate to outcomes, of course, it's a kind of a dynamic framework, but fiscal is quite an important determinant of, getting the outcomes.
And in the end, my last question is that, of course, we are just beginning to have these conversations. But so far, how has India's progress been? Are you satisfied, both in terms of research and policy? And why I'm asking this is because, for instance, like you were also saying, we see that, a lot of times things get done. For instance, the most important thing that, in the budget that the finance ministry does is how they meet their fiscal deficit target. But people in the ministry have on record said that, they do it by all kinds of creative accounting, using all kinds of tricks. There isn't the kind of sincerity or the sincerity to, fiscal consolidation that drives their efforts. So when that is the main thing they do and they're not able to do it with full sincerity, uh, you know, uh, can we expect that, they will be able to devote themselves with that kind of sincerity and integrity to something which is still new, in its infancy? And it's probably not the main thing they think they do when they make the budget.
You said it. First is first is you're talking about the fiscal consolidation framework, and now everything is based on the stability of revenue that we decide on our expenditure decisions. So it's with the moment we talk about the debt deficit dynamics, I think this pandemic, at least in this extraordinary times, I feel that we need to go little innovative about the debt deficit dynamics. I do think that we need to, go for monetization, or the financing pattern of the deficit needs a rethinking. And unless we do that, expenditure compression is going to happen. And the moment we think about expenditure compression, because the taxes are not buoyant, and that will affect the human development related spending. It already affected the capital infrastructure related spending. So if the expenditure compression path we take rather than tax buoyancy is not happening, and if we have a fiscal consolidation framework, you are right that this strict macroeconomic framework and these constraints, and European Union is talking this in terms of austerity, but we have not yet called it an austerity and a humanitarian crisis, but it is mounting. The moment we think about a strict fiscal consolidation, I think it's going to affect the social sector, and in particular the human development related spending, because expenditure compression will be the path they will be taking to reach the target. But the path you take is equally important as your target.
Yeah, and I just want to add here that even before the pandemic, for years, even in the good revenue years, we know that finance ministry does all these tricks. They are not, so carefully trying to manage the fiscal deficit. Even in the 1 or 2 years where revenue collections have not been, that much of a constraint, they've not been very serious about these issues. And if they're not serious about what they think is the main thing they do, then naturally they're not going to be serious about the gender sensitive part of the budget. And as a result, the social sector is going to be paying the price for it. And the tragedy is that sometimes, as somebody who's been going to the finance ministry as a reporter for more than 1.5 decades now, I feel that they just reduce everything to that one number, and they forget that after all, why do you have a budget? Why do you have a finance ministry? Why do you have a government? It is so that the economy can develop, and that development, human development part, social justice part, just becomes so far removed from the day-to-day functioning of the finance ministry that all these creative accounting and tricks become second nature, in some way. And this has been true even before the pandemic. It's almost always like this. So
yeah.
so that's
points,
what
yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me.
No, so that's what I'm saying, that that is going to be a big challenge for such a policy paradigm shift.
Yeah. I got your point. 2 points. One is you talked about the budget credibility. That's an important concern. Like you rightly pointed out that even before pandemic, budget credibility was a concern. In NIPFP, we have done this budget credibility analysis for the national and the subnational levels. What we try to do is, if the fiscal marksmanship is not perfect, what is the source of error of the forecasting? So it's a kind of a mixed picture we got. Like we try to analyze that it's the bias of the policy maker that's leading to the budget, lack of budget credibility, or it is a random thing. But at the center government level, we are getting a consistent result that it is more or less the random factors leading to the kind of the budgetary errors. But we need to look into that. But I'm completely aware of the question you are asking, that if you have a tax projection and the tax realized, why the models failed, why you are not able to. But there it's a mix of the random factors and the bias of the policymaker. The moment we identify the components in which the bias of the policymaker matter, then we need to frame the policy modeling differently. And at the subnational level, in many states, I don't remember the states, but your point is quite valid, that the policymakers' bias is getting into the forecasting errors. And most of the forecasting errors are happening at the intergovernmental fiscal transfer, especially grants, or the capital spending, or in some states, it is the tax projections. And you can appreciate that, grants, that is quite erratic in the recent years, the grant component of the intergovernmental fiscal transfers, and that's affecting the expenditure decisions of the subnational government. And second is the capital spending. Again, it's related to your point on the fiscal consolidation. The moment a state has to come up with a threshold ratio that you cannot spend more than 3%, or you have to keep your fiscal deficit at 3%, they will forego the capital spending. So the fiscal marksmanship or the budget credibility with regard to the capital budget may be related to that big question you're highlighting, that it's maybe for the fiscal consolidation they're doing.
To end, just to sort of reiterate the point about how this policymakers, budget makers bias sometimes probably may be coming in way of allocations or budgeting turning into outcomes. Yeah. Even in the human development sphere.
Yeah, I think in the context of your book, I think we have discussed about this issue, that how the career theories of the individuals getting into the outcomes. Like we asked a question, you remember, I think in the Vive Reddy's book release function, we were talking about how the personal characteristics or the career theories of a leader affects the outcome, like how the personal characteristics of your prime minister affect your economic growth, or how the personal characteristics of a central bank governor is going to decide your interest rate, whether if the woman is on board, then can she be hawkish, and also the finance minister, if he's from a heterodox background or from a non-orthodox economics background, the path taken to the fiscal consolidation will be little different than expenditure compression. So these kind of career theories, the moment we think, I think the personal characteristics of a finance minister matter, and matters are that kind of I think it's a new kind of literature coming up. And in Public Choice, that journal I read about the European context, scholars are working on it. Maybe that non-economic factors also are significant determinant of outcomes. It's not just economic policy, or it's more than that. Institution matter, institutional virtuosity matters, individual virtuosity equally matters in the way you take the decisions and you prioritize or you own your choices. That's quite relevant. I agree.
So both in terms of goals of policy making as well as what goes into policy making, on both sides, I think there is now a realization that we need to have broader approach to analyzing and looking at the issues at hand. I think that's my biggest takeaway from
Absolutely.
our great conversation today. Thank you so much, Lekha. Thanks a lot. This is just wonderful.
Thank you so much. It's my absolute privilege to talk to you. Thank you so much, Pooja.